I did?
Yeah, you said
Oh, no, then she corrected me, yeah, okay. All right, so some of you, when you walked in, you remembered this is the room where you used to do story time. And we're not really doing story time today, but we're doing something called a book talk. And a book talk is where perhaps a librarian walks into your school or your library, or you come to the library like you are here today, and we talk about some of the books we really love. So, I'm going to start with this one. It's called More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz, because Halloween's right around the corner, right? These scary stories will take you on a strange and fearsome journey where darkness, fog, or mist, or the screaming of a person, or the barking of a dog will turn an ordinary time into a nightmarish one, where places and things are nothing like what you expect. So some of the stories in here are long, some aren't more than a page, but I guarantee every one will give you shivers by the end. More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark by Alvin Schwartz. Now, this is one of those books that has a number, and you'll find it in the nonfiction section because, you know, it's stories that came out of a particular culture. All right, so we have Halloween, and then comes Thanksgiving, and then what's next?
Christmas.
Holiday season. Or Hanukkah, fair enough, absolutely. So, this next book is decidedly Christmas, I'm afraid. It's called When Santa Fell to Earth by Cornelia Funke. Hi, my name's Ben. So, one day, we were on our way to school, and there was this thing at the end of the lane. It was a caravan. A caravan is kind of like a covered wagon, but it was all decorated up. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not the most popular kid in school. In fact, sometimes I kind of get picked on. And so I lost a bet, and all the guys made me go down and knock on the door of the caravan. I went down, I knocked on the door. A young man opened the door, and I bolted. I ran as fast as I could away from there. So all the guys were teasing me at school that day. They hadn't seen what I had seen. Inside the man's pocket, poking out of his pocket, was a little man, this big, with a pointy red hat on his head.
The funny
As an elf. Well, the next day, I couldn't help myself. I was drawn back to the caravan. I walked back down. It almost took everything I had, and I knocked on the door again.
Don't run.
This time, I was invited in, and I discovered there wasn't just one elf, there were several. And I looked around, and it was enormous inside. And the elf that was talking to me said, "Oh, all Santa caravans are like this." Santa, the guy didn't look like Santa, he was pretty young. And the elf said, "This is Niklaus, the last real Santa. If they'd had their way," and he pointed to a white door at the end of the caravan, "he would have been turned into chocolate a long time ago." "Well, what's behind that door?" I said. And the Santa said, "It's not a very nice story. Are you sure you want to hear it?" And I nodded my head. And he said, "Well, maybe it is time for at least one child to know the real story of what happened to Christmas." So it turns out there isn't just one Santa, there are lots of them. But this terrible Santa that has come and gotten all the power is named Goblinch, and he's ruined Christmas. He decided to convince all the other Santas not to pay attention to the children's wish lists and to just pay attention to the grown-ups. Now, nothing is made by hand, everything's made in a factory. And this Santa, Niklaus, told me the whole story. He's stuck here making repairs to his caravan from his fall out of the sky, and now strange things are happening. At school, some golden nuts just showed up in somebody's lunch. And all the doormats, they're starting to glitter. They just have a life of their own. And when you take an apple out to eat it, in place of the stem, there's a little Christmas tree on top. It's been really fun, but there's danger lurking. And my friend Charlotte and I will have to help Niklaus if we don't want Goblinch to ruin Christmas. When Santa Fell to Earth by Cornelia Funke.
That was long.
You want to check out that book? It's nice. This one looks really spooky. It looks like it would be a Halloween book, but it's really a mystery. It's The Curse of the Missing Marquess, an Enola Holmes mystery by Nancy Springer. Well, you may have heard of my big brother, Sherlock Holmes. He's a very famous detective. He was famous for being having a keen mind and his acute sense of observation. But what people really don't know about him very often is that he had a younger sister, me, Enola. I'm not a bad sleuther either. I'm just like my brother that way. I'm pretty clever. But as a lady living in the Victorian period, I'm expected to stay at home and sew things and paint things, things I'm not particularly interested in. Well, on my 14th birthday, out of the blue, my mother disappeared. And even the great Sherlock Holmes cannot find her. Now my brothers, Sherlock and Mycroft, want to send me to a boarding school. Well, I can tell you I am not going. My mother, she left me clues. Clues about where she is, clues about how to find her. And even Sherlock can't figure it out. Well, I'm going to go find her. I'm leaving. They don't know it, but I am. I'm going to go far away, and I'm going to find my mom. Read The Case of the Missing Marquess, the first book in the Enola Holmes mystery series. Solve cases right along with Enola while keeping one step ahead of Sherlock.
Yeah, busted.
All right. So I've told you some books.
There's different sorts of types of those books. I've read there's more of an older version of Snow Treasure.
So let me tell everybody else about it, okay? And then you can hop on the bandwagon when you're heading back and tell them how great it is. The books that I've already told you about are straight up fiction, fantasy kinds of books. This book is historical fiction. It's something that might have happened. And actually this story is really a legend. And a legend is the kind of story that is based on truth somehow. Snow Treasure by Mary McSwiden. We know for a fact that in 1940, a ship, a Norwegian freighter, came into Baltimore Harbor. It was carrying $9 million worth of gold bullion. In today's money, that's $145 million worth of gold. So how that gold got there involves this story with Nazis, Norwegian children, and miles and miles and miles of sledding. This is what happened. In the winter of 1940, the Nazis have already arrived in Norway. They're taking over everything. Peter's father is a banker, and one night he overhears him talking to some other grown-ups, and he says, "They'll never get our gold." His father turned to face the other men in the living room. "Not an ounce of it will they touch. Of that I am determined." But then he saw Peter in the corner of the room. "Peter, get out of here. Go back to bed." "No, wait a minute, Lars," said Uncle Victor. "Peter's nearly 13. It's Peter and his friends who are his age who can save our gold. Why didn't we see it before? This will be perfect." A plan is devised, a dangerous scheme, and they need the children. Somehow, they're going to smuggle 13 tons of gold bullion out of Norway right under the Nazis' noses. Will they survive?
Yes.
Okay, so my last one is a little bit spooky again.
Yay.
Zorgamazoo
Zorgamazoo.
by Robert Paul Weston. This book rhymes, which might not be your favorite thing, but have a listen. I'll warn you, of course, before we commence, my story is eerie and full of suspense, brimming with danger and narrow escapes and creatures of many remarkable shapes. Dragons and ogres and gorgons and more, and creatures you've not even heard of before. And faraway places, there's plenty of those. And menacing villains to tingle your toes. So the story begins with Katrina. Katrina is down in the subway and she sees something out in the dark tunnel. She can't quite make it out. And she's trying to get her guardian's attention. She's saying, hey, hey, did you see that down there? And her guardian has absolutely no time for nonsense, and she's had it. And she tells Katrina she had better be silent. In that voice that grown-ups sometimes have when you know they mean business. So Katrina stays silent, but she keeps looking. Now I'm going to read to you from this book because it's got some interesting print. Watching the weave of the wandering track, examining close every cranny and crack in search of the thing that had briefly appeared, all hairy with horns and a whiskery beard. A creature, a beastie, a troll, or a gnome? But she saw nothing more.
Oh, I love this book now.
And I'm gonna end
My
with
birthday's
this.
on Halloween.
So if you've no time for whimsical things, for pirates and gadgets and creatures and kings, if you spurn the fantastic to never return, then put this book down. It is not your concern. Ah, you're still here. Then I'm grateful to you, for this book needs a reader, as all of them do.
I want
I'm so glad you guys are excited about the books. I'll just revisit these titles for you. More Scary Stories by Alvin Schwartz. When Santa Fell to Earth by Cornelia Funke. The Case of the Missing Marquettes by Nancy Springer. Snow Treasure by Marie McSwagan. And Zorga Mazoo by Robert Paul Weston. Okay, so all of those books you would find in the chapter section, but I just want to tell you again, remember how fairy tales are in nonfiction? Also stories like this, Ulysses. I just want to encourage you to wander back there sometimes because things like fairy tales, this looks like a picture book, doesn't it? And like something that as you grow older you might not care about. But I invite you to revisit fairy tales your whole life. They are one kind of story when you're 3 or 4 years old. They're another kind of story when you're the age you are now. They're another kind of story when you're older, a young grown-up, 20 years old. And they're another story again when you have children of your own. So fairy tales can last you your whole life. And don't ever be embarrassed to check out a book that looks like this. It's obviously not for a beginning reader. It's got all kinds of lots of print in it. And this is, it's just something I think we should point out to you guys. It's sometimes called The Loathsome Dragon. It's a really good story about a brother and a sister. The sister gets turned into a dragon.
The sister?
Yeah. So it's not a prince and a princess for a change.
Girl power.
And then Ulysses is, these stories, the adventures of Ulysses were written, I don't know, practically 3,000 years ago. Fabulous story. But again, not the kind of story that a little tiny kid could read. It's really designed for somebody your age. And these stories have lasted the centuries and millennia, over thousands of years, because they're so fantastic. Okay, so the next thing we have for you, thank you so much for all your attention for my book talk. That was fun.